Much is known about Adolf Hitler. He was vegetarian, partial to the toothbrush mustache, and a failed artist. But as the new bestseller Blitzed reports in incredible detail, Hitler was also a hardcore closet junkie, ingesting mass amounts of narcotics for much of World War II, as was most of the Third Reich.
How do you know that Hitler was on drugs?
In Germany, we keep records of everything, and I was fortunate enough to find the records, the notes of Theo Morell, who was the personal physician of Hitler.
Is there a certain aspect of it that's like a Rorschach test? Like it requires, like what does it say about you that you looked at that evidence and you're like, oh, it's totally drugs?
As a novelist and as someone being partly socialized in Berlin in the 90s,
Go on.
drugs certainly are not as alien to me in my field of work or life or research as they might be for a tweed-wearing historian in a small German or British town. So maybe it had to be an out-of-the-box person to approach it that way.
Dr. Morell was a well-paid celebrity doctor of the 30s who was a pioneer in treating people with vitamins. He was the sort of man who, when the war started, designed himself a fantasy uniform with a lavish SS belt buckle that the SS forced him to remove.
It was an important part of the Führer cult to portray Hitler as a teetotaler who wouldn't even drink coffee, who wouldn't smoke a cigarette, no alcohol, no meat. The problem started in 1941, in August, when Hitler for the first time became sick, and Morell gives him a hormone injection and gives him an opiate for the first time. 43, when he gets an opiate called Oikodal, which is very strong, stronger than heroin, with a very strong euphoric making effect.
We now know Oikodal is oxycodone, which Hitler was mainlining, but the Führer wasn't the only one who was high during the war.
There's a lot to be found on the meth abuse by the German army. Methamphetamine reduces your need to sleep and also reduces your fear. This actually happened before the attack on France, for the campaign in the West. 35 million dosages of methamphetamine were being shipped to the tank troops. The West was sure that any army in the world, this is just what human nature is, has to rest at night, which the Germans just didn't do.
The meth that was so successful in early campaigns would eventually fail them later. And in 1944, when the Brits bombed the factories that made the drugs, Hitler and his doctor found themselves at odds.
So we all know what happened to Hitler, but what actually happened to Hitler's doctor?
Morell at one point writes in 45 that he's sending 2 of his aides on motorcycles through bombed-out Berlin in order to find pharmacies that still had drugs in vain, when he cannot even give Hitler a strong drug on Hitler's birthday, April 20th, 1945. Hitler fires him a few days later.
But does painting Hitler and his cronies as drug addicts humanize the Nazis?
It's very important to realize that the politics, the planning, has nothing to do with drugs. Drugs were used later on in the war effort, but would drugs lessen the responsibility? And my conclusion is no.